Sunflowers and Jesus. And I imagine Graffs are with family today. I'm sad that Tammy's not here for this today, but she largely inspired this because she started last year bringing sunflowers over to my house. And she planted sunflowers last year around our garden, and the deer loved them. A couple of them did survive, and I teased her. She came over every day. In fact, one day she did step in a hole and fell and had trouble, and we weren't home. She had to call Mike to come get her, and that gave me a lot of entertainment too. I'm still having fun with that. But she comes over and she takes care of those sunflowers every day. And you would think when you'd see her over there watering those sunflowers that she loves those sunflowers because, every day she's over there. But I understand and I know that she wouldn't have come to my house to take care of sunflowers. She could do that at her house. And I feel a little bit loved because I told her sunflowers are my favorite flower. But I did notice that the sunflowers at her house were much taller and healthier than the ones at my house. So I told her I'm not sure she loves my sunflowers quite as much as her sunflowers. But she assured me that was because of where we had placed them, and the deer had something to do with it, and she was just fortunate that some of them survived. But sunflowers are beautiful. Does anyone know why they're called sunflowers? Yeah, they face the sun. You see, you all know this stuff. I am so slow. I thought it was because they looked like the sun with the rays and things, and they do, right? But they are incredible because they have this big head on them, right? And they follow the sun. In the morning, at dawn, they're facing east. And all day long, they track the sun across the sky. And Evie's downstairs. All the people that would really relate to my illustrations are not here tonight. But they follow the sun across the sky. And at night, they spend the night rotating back and facing the east, anticipating the sun's arrival again. But here's something else I didn't know about sunflowers. And this is why I thought Evie would really enjoy. The way they tip, or they follow the sun, is they grow on one side. They elongate starting on the west side, and then throughout the day they grow on the east side so that they can shove the head of the flower across to the sun. And then overnight, they even their growth back out to face east again. In fact, adult sunflowers don't follow the sun. They just face east. And that didn't work perfectly in my illustration tonight, but it will work. So you know everything there is to know about sunflowers. What in the world does that have to do with Jesus? And I hope you're suspenseful for a couple more moments on that idea. You know, I've shared many times I used to look at my Bible as a rule book. And that's just not written that way. I'm not saying there's no rules in it, but it's just so much more than that. And to me, that's a beautiful thing. But having said that, sometimes a rule book is easier to follow, right? It's kind of easy to check a box, say, yep, that's done, missed that one, I have to come back to it, and to know, here's the rules. Here's what you've got to do. I love that the Bible is not a rule book, and it's so much more than that. But here's the part that I don't know that I love. I'm pretty certain I don't love. There's a lot of situations in my life where I'm left thinking, what would Jesus do right now? What would Jesus do with this situation? Because I'm not told just merely to keep some rules. I am told to be the image of God, to follow after Jesus. And while that's way, way more inspirational and exciting, it's also a whole lot more challenging. Has anyone here not been in a position in the last week, 2 weeks, where you said, I'm not certain exactly what the right answer is here? What am I expected to do? And that's why I want to come back to sunflowers tonight. That's why I want to talk sunflowers. I don't have a lot of objective, tangible, take this home and here's what I do today to be a better person, which is typically, whether you can tell or not, what I'm striving to do in each of my sermons. It's more of a step back and say, here's what we can do. Here's what I'm going to try to do this week. When I have these 80 kids, and you talk about situations where you're like, what am I going to do? I mean, last year I talked to Andy about this and some of our other professionals. I mean, I'm like, man, Jesus was patient with these kids. But there's also times where he made a whip too. and maybe it's time to get the whip, but I'm not sure where we are, right? And so as I go throughout day camp, I'm going to strive to do this when things get difficult. Someone read for us, Mike read for us, from Hebrews 12, 1 through 4, 1 through 4. And it looks like I only have 1 through 2 there, which is unfortunate. But the 11th chapter is this amazing chapter with all these incredible people. But yet this statement, while they did amazing things and they were fathers of our faith in so many ways, we're told in that 11th chapter, all these died having not obtained the promise. And you think about Moses, and you think about Abraham and Sarah and Joseph and some of these great giants of the faith. As great as they were, they didn't get to see the time of the Messiah. And we've got to live there. That's really cool. And the Hebrew writers tell them is they struggled with all the conflicts of their culture, with all the peer pressures of the day as they were being pulled back into their nation. The Hebrew writers say, no. You see, all these people, all the forefathers of your faith were great people. But what made them great is they were moving forward to someone they hadn't seen yet, to something they hadn't ever arrived at. They were sojourners. They were travelers because they hadn't reached the city. And as that chapter comes to an end, he makes this statement. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus. Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Now, these people were having horrible things happen to them. And Mike read 3 and 4 for us as we'd asked him to do. And there, the Hebrew writer says, look to Jesus, who went clear to the cross. He's saying, follow Jesus. And he says this to them, you have not yet resisted to the point of blood. And we know historically that they did shortly thereafter. He says, look at Jesus and pursue him. Well, the Hebrew letter is this amazing letter because every chapter explains to us how great Jesus is. And tomorrow, when I address the kids at day camp for the first time, I get the opportunity to talk to them about this concept. Why is Jesus worth following? Have you ever been asked that question? Why is Jesus worth following? Here's the answer. You see, the Hebrew writer has spent 11 chapters explaining why Jesus is worth following. And then he says, because of all that, lay all the weights, lay all the hindrances, all the obstacles, all the distractions aside, and run after them while you look at him. Here's why he's worth doing it. Long ago, at many times in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets, but in these last days, he's spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God in the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. And after making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. That sevenfold description of Jesus is so magnificent and so great that we could spend months right there on those 7 things. But in short, what the Hebrew writers start in saying is Jesus is worth following. Because if God was a man, he'd be Jesus. And so he's worth following. And for me, that's both inspirational and daunting, like I said earlier about the Bible. Inspirational because this is the guy I get to follow. This is the guy I get to pattern my life after. And daunting because I'm called to be like God in human form. And I'm not cut out for that. I was cut out for it. I just don't live it, right? But God doesn't expect the impossible from me. And that's the amazing thing. That throughout even that 11th chapter, we talked about the great giants, or I spoke about the giants of faith. Is there anyone in that chapter that didn't have significant flaws? Now, I'm not talking about the kind of flaws where a guy snaps his wife occasionally, because that one's not so bad, right? Well, that depends. I'm talking about the kind of flaws where people snicker and talk about, the kind that show up in the newspaper and people read about it. Those kind of flaws. And one of the things that 11th chapter and the whole Bible in itself is telling us is God's going to use people. And you're people, and so he can use you. You see, there are some ways that I can't relate to Jesus. He was just great, right? Evie and I have been going to the gym a couple mornings a week, and she shoots, and I rebound for her, and I toss her the ball, and I coach her a little bit. And, if I went to the gym with Michael Jordan, I don't think I'd give him any tips, right? Even if he missed 8 shots in a row, I don't think I'd tell him he's not following through, right? And my point is that what's amazing about God using people is it's attainable. God knows you're flawed. He could have snapped his fingers like we read in that first chapter of Genesis, and it's just there, it's just done. But instead he says, no, I want you folks from Summerville and Brookville and Roseville and Oh, let's see, the habit, I normally look right, Kevin, say even New Bethlehem. But I'll say even Hawthorne, right? Yeah. I'm going to use you guys to do it. And that's amazing. So how do we go about this? How do we do it? Simple concept tonight. And yet I think there's a lifetime of inspiration here. These sunflowers look at the sun intensely all day long. Their gaze is fixed directly on the sun. And do you know why they do that? Up until recently, some of the studies I saw were as recent as 2016. There's some obvious answers that sunlight helps with, is necessary, doesn't just help, with photosynthesis. Thank you. We didn't learn that in kindergarten. I know my biology wife back here is just crawling right now. Right, there's some obvious answers. But that's not the primary answers, because we have some roses or something out in the front of the yard that was planted there a long time for, and they look beautiful, and they use the sunlight for food, right? But they don't follow the sun like that. Can anyone tell me why sunflowers follow the sun? Anna thinks she knows. Go ahead, Anna. Because they're called sunflowers. They're living up to their name. I like the way you think. Hey, what else? I heard something somewhere.
They got to get every single bit that they can.
Yeah, that we would lean that way. And that's kind of the way we would typically think about that. They have to, it's self-serving, right? Here's why they're so neat. And here's where the lesson is. They face the sun because it makes their face radiate and warmer, and it's more attractive to bees. And so the bees come and land on it because of the warmth, because it's beneficial for them, and that's how they reproduce. That's how they pollinate. There's a lot of issues in life that I think, man, I truly don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do in this situation. I know I'm supposed to be the image of God. I know I'm supposed to mimic Christ. I know I've got to ask myself, what would Jesus do? But Lord, help me, because I don't know what it is right here. And this illustration for me is really helpful. I'm going to look at Jesus with such awe and inspiration and fixate on him all day long. And I believe that my face will be all the warmer, all the more beneficial. And I believe Christians will spread like pollen in doing that. Jesus had an interesting saying when you take this 16th verse out of Matthew 5, didn't he? In the same way. He was, full disclosure, he wasn't talking about sunflowers. If you'll bear with me in that way, in the same way. Let your light shine before others so that you may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. You see, we're not called to give our own glory. We're not told to shine and be better than everyone else in the world. We're told to look towards the sun. In so doing, allow our light to shine. Allow others to see our good works and glorify our Father which is in heaven. The one you follow doesn't walk on water. If he's not worth gazing at all the day long, you're following the wrong individual. And so I encourage you to be inspired, to be dedicated, to be in awe of Jesus Christ, and to pursue him with everything you have. If we can help you do that tonight, please make it known as together we stand and sing.